Welcome back to our channel. Thank you for your continued support. All content is purely speculative and based on personal experience. If you find the video interesting and helpful, please support me with a like and a comment. Let's dive in together. What led Dany to seek comfort from Bill, or what serious event happened to her and her children? Does Andre know Dany is seeking Bill's help? Will Hayley allow Dany to see Bill? Dany arrived at Bill's doorstep one evening when Fairmont Crest was trying to feign peace, a peace so fragile that a single doorbell would shatter it. Dany's anger didn't erupt like fire. It was thick like smoke, clinging to her throat and making each breath sting. All day, she was haunted by the doctor's cold words and the family's strained expressions, by the thought that Anita's health was no longer a private matter but a major crack in the Dupree family's wall of power. And when power cracks, lurkers begin to reach in. Dany understood this better than anyone, for she herself had once used the fears of others to manipulate them, only now she was being controlled by her own fear. She hadn't come here just to talk about her children, but she couldn't admit it from the start either, because if she did, she would have to acknowledge her weakness, her panic, and her need for something like a support system. She hated that feeling. She hated standing at the door of the man who used to be hers, like someone seeking petty comfort. But she hated it even more when she later realized she had remained silent, while her daughters faced a danger she had foreseen. Dany rang the doorbell. Just seconds later, Hayley appeared, swift and sharp as a blade, her eyes accusing without question. Hayley yelled for Dany to leave, as if Dany were some kind of pollution that had just entered her new territory. And in that moment, Dany saw clearly what lay behind Hayley's anger. Not just jealousy. Not just the new wife defending her territory, but the panic of someone holding a hard-to-swallow secret. Hayley wasn't just driving Dany away, she was trying to extinguish a spark before it ignited a fire. Dany realized this, and her instincts instantly shifted from defense to attack. She took another step forward, not necessarily to provoke, but to remind herself that she still had the right to enter Bill's life at any time, at least as the mother of his children. The noise pulled Bill out of his spot. He appeared with a practiced, annoyed expression, the kind of annoyance a man who thinks he can control everything if he keeps his voice cold enough. He asked what was going on, then looked at Dany as if she were a dangerous variable. Dany didn't miss that moment. She saw something mixed in his eyes, frustration, wariness, and a trace of old emotions he'd tried to bury. Bill spoke bluntly, saying there was nothing Dany needed to say that couldn't be said in front of Hayley. That statement was like a barrier he'd erected, both to protect their current marriage and to punish Dany for daring to bring chaos to his doorstep. Dany interrupted him. She said this concerned their daughters. Those 3 words fell like a hammer blow. Bill couldn't ignore it. Hayley couldn't disregard it either. And that only angered Hayley further. Because for Bill, his children were both his weakness and his pride, the only thing that could force him to change tactics immediately. Dany had put the right key in the right lock. She did so partly because she was genuinely worried, and partly because she wanted to see Hayley lose control, because someone who loses control often reveals weaknesses. Dany looked at Hayley and said nothing more, but questions raced through her mind. Did Anita's condition mean there was a curse in their bloodline? Were her daughters being dragged into it? Was she exaggerating out of panic? And if she was panicking, why did she go to Bill instead of going home to hug her mother? The answer made Dany hate herself, because Bill had once been her confidant, her support when she wanted to turn her fear into a plan. She came here partly because she still believed Bill understood how to handle the crisis with power, with his network, with calls that ordinary people couldn't make. But she also came because of the overwhelming emptiness after the news about Anita. She didn't want to see her family's eyes right now, eyes that would see through her anxiety and turn it into weakness. Here, in front of Bill, she could pretend she was just a mother doing her duty. Dany kept a calm voice and said that given Anita's health condition, this was a terrible time for anything worse to happen. She mentioned the possibility of genetics, the necessary tests, the signs that shouldn't be ignored. Bill listened, his expression growing increasingly grim. He hated the feeling of being cornered by something he couldn't sue, couldn't buy, couldn't negotiate. Cancer wasn't an opponent on Bill's chessboard, but it was something that could destroy it. He wanted control. Dany saw this and felt a cold satisfaction well up inside her. She still knew how to make Bill take things seriously. But right beside her, Hayley flared up as if oil had been poured on her. Hayley couldn't accept that Dany could stand here, mention the children, touch upon Bill's protective instincts, and pull him toward her with just a few words. Hayley was jealous, yes. But that was only the surface. Beneath it was fear. The fear that if Bill was pulled toward Dany, he would remember what they had once shared, and worse, he would see the things Hayley was hiding. Hayley looked at Dany like a hunter who had sniffed out its prey. Dany looked back at Hayley the same way. A brief, sharp memory flashed through Dany's mind, the image of Hayley and Randy together in a place where they shouldn't be. The moment Dany had told herself she might be seeing some dirty connection, something like a conspiracy. At the time, Dany had no proof, only intuition. But Dany's intuition was rarely wrong. And now, with Hayley's irrationally violent reaction, Dany was even more convinced she had touched a nerve. Dany didn't directly mention Randy, not in a hurry. She used the children as a mask, and behind that mask, she began to weave her web. She asked Bill about the children's health checkup schedule, whether he knew about the familial nature of certain cancers, and whether he was prepared to pay for the most thorough tests and the best doctors. Those questions were reasonable. Anyone could see her as a worried mother. But Dany deliberately spoke. Slowly, deliberately using words that made Bill think of files, tests, reports, updates, things that evoked Anita's world and the terrifying discrepancies that the Dupree family had recently been obsessed with. Dany wanted Bill to make connections. Dany wanted Bill to wonder if Anita's records could be falsified, then anyone's records could be falsified. And if records could be falsified, then someone could be manipulating the truth. Hayley stood there listening, and each word Dany spoke was like a nail hammered into her composure. Hayley tried to interrupt, tried to make Dany the troublemaker, but Bill began to focus in a dangerous way, focusing like a lawyer sniffing out a case, like a predator identifying its target. Bill didn't like being exposed, but he disliked being made the victim even less. Dany looked at Bill and knew she had achieved her first goal, to make Bill shed his role as the troubled husband and return to his role as the man of power and calculation. But that was also when Dany's inner conflict flared up most intensely. She wondered what she was doing. Was she truly worried about her child, or was she using that worry to draw Bill closer, to punish Hayley, to reclaim a sense of power she was losing in the family as Anita weakened? Dany hated to answer. She felt angry at Hayley, angry at Bill, and angry at herself for still being manipulated by them both. But that anger helped her stand firm. It was her armor. Hayley suddenly changed tactics. She wasn't just yelling anymore. She began looking at Bill pleadingly, warningly, as if Dany were coming to destroy their lives. And Bill, instead of comforting Hayley, became even colder. He didn't like being manipulated emotionally. The more Hayley displayed her jealousy, the more uncomfortable Bill became, because it made him feel dragged down by petty squabbles, while Dany was talking about something bigger: health, genetics, the future, and the crumbling power of the Dupree family. Dany realized something that chilled her. Hayley wasn't just afraid of Dany. Hayley was afraid of Bill himself as he began to think in ways that weren't under her control. And that was a sign of a secret. Dany took another risk. She mentioned that Fairmont Crest had recently experienced too many strange coincidences, too many discrepancies, too many strangers appearing at the right time. She said that she didn't want her children to become victims of any game. She didn't say Hayley's name, didn't say Randy's name, but she left the word game hanging like a hook. Hayley flinched. Dany saw it clearly. And Dany understood that Hayley might have heard, or would hear, something that threatened her secret. At that very moment, Hayley envisioned the worst-case scenario. Dany and Bill would talk privately, bringing up things related to files, tests, and evidence, and Bill would focus on any anomalies, just as he always did with his rivals. Hayley couldn't let that happen. She began to find a way to steer the conversation. She talked about Dany using Anita's illness to create drama, to manipulate Bill, to cause chaos. It was a cruel blow because it touched on Dany's deepest shame, the fear that she herself was using illness as a weapon. Dany was struck by the words, and her first reaction was to explode. But she held back, knowing that if she lost her temper, Hayley would win. Dany swallowed her anger, transforming it into something sharper. She looked at Hayley with an unspoken gaze that made Hayley uneasy, then turned to Bill and reiterated the core message: the children. Bill was caught between two opposing forces. He wanted to side with Hayley to keep the house peaceful, but he couldn't ignore the possibility of his daughter's safety. And most of all, he felt insulted by the thought that someone in this very house might be hiding something from him. Bill began to think of Randy. He had no proof, but Dany had inadvertently or intentionally brought up that name in his alert system. Bill knew Randy was the type of person who could cause trouble. Bill also knew Hayley had a questionable past. Bill didn't want to admit he'd married a danger, but the truth tended to surface when someone stirred the water. Dany stirred the water. Hayley saw the water ripple. And at that moment, a difficult decision formed in each of them, like knives being drawn in the darkness. Dany decided she wouldn't leave until Bill committed to a plan to investigate the children, and until she was sure Hayley was no longer capable of hiding anything that could harm their family. But deeper down, Dany also decided she would make the most of this rift to reclaim her place in Bill's life, not out of love, but because she needed the feeling that she could still win, still be in control, while her mother's world was slipping away. Bill decided he would temporarily keep Dany around rationally, but soon after, he would secretly investigate. He would examine everything related to Hayley, Randy, the meetings, the transfers, the schedules. Bill didn't say it out loud, but deep down, his trust in Hayley had just been shattered. And Hayley, in her anger and panic, decided that if Dany was getting closer to the truth, she had to act first. Not with shouting, not with jealousy, but with a move that would silence Dany. Hayley stood there, watching Bill and Dany, and dark scenarios flashed through her mind. Discredit Dany, make Dany appear panicked after Anita's shock, even create an incident large enough for Dany to be busy saving herself. She didn't act immediately, but the intention flashed like lightning. Bill's house was no longer a home. It had become a battlefield, where talk of children was just an excuse, and what was really happening was a power struggle, a fight for control, and a concealment of secrets. Outside, Fairmont Crest was lit as usual, but inside, the three of them were cornered by their own fears. Dany feared losing her mother, losing her children, losing her position, and admitting that she needed Bill. Bill feared what he couldn't control, fearing being made a fool of in his new marriage, fearing seeing that he had made the wrong choice. Hayley feared the truth, the past, being unmasked, and Bill returning to Dany when he sensed betrayal. And when Dany looked directly at Bill, keeping her voice steady and reiterated that this involved their daughters, she understood she had just opened a door that could not be closed. If Bill agreed to investigate, Hayley would be forced to reveal herself. If Bill didn't agree, Dany would investigate on her own and make Bill an outsider in his own family. Hayley listened to every word and realized that whether Dany talked about the children or not, Dany carried something more dangerous than any insult, a suspicion that could turn Hayley into a public enemy. Hayley tried to remain calm, but her hands trembled, and Dany saw it. Dany didn't need proof at that moment. Her reaction alone was enough for her to know that there was a secret between Hayley and Randy, and that secret was teetering on the brink. Bill, standing between the two women, suddenly realized his earlier statement was wrong. There were things Dany needed to say, but couldn't say in front of Hayley, not because Dany respected Hayley, but because Hayley might do anything to prevent the truth from coming out. And when Bill realized that, a chill ran down his spine, because he understood that people who would do anything to silence the truth wouldn't stop at shouting. They would act. And if Hayley acted, the target wouldn't just be Dany. But everything Bill thought he was protecting, including the children Dany had just mentioned as a curse and a warning.